Welcome to Docs Outside the Box podcast. This is your official show, looking inside the minds of cutting-edge and innovative doctors. Think you'll find these stories in any medical textbook? Sorry. You're getting real life insight from men and women pushing the envelope beyond medicine. Ordinary doctors doing extraordinary things. Let's start now with your host, Dr. Nee Darko.
So, Dr. Dawn, what's good? How you doing?
I'm good. How you all doing tonight?
We chilling. Kwesi, what's up, man? You all the way in Venice?
Yep, I'm good. Got the Lakers Denver in the background. Lakers are getting beat by a lot. It's okay.
How much money are you losing on this?
None. I'm actually making money. We don't need to start the podcast talking about my investments.
I mean, look, we either talk about the Lakers who are playing right now, or we can clown Dr. Dawn and her Rockets who are sitting at home right now.
Hey.
Right?
Every year. we just think it's our year. It's not.
Hey, you had 94. You had 95, right? So, take it for what it's worth. You beat my Knicks in 94.
And your team has made the playoffs. You get to watch your team into April, May, and sometime. No, just April and May. Never June.
Yeah, never.
Never June. Hey, it's better than Nina's Knicks, who.
But I divorced myself from the Knicks. You can't say that anymore. I'm no longer a Knicks fan. I've given up on the Knicks. I gave up that narcotic. Right? Like, I'm done with them. They're not trying to win. So why should I be a fan for the Knicks?
See, I don't understand that mentality that people are from New York. They're just gonna go hard for their squad, but they never win. So you don't never experience like championships.
They're not trying to win, Dr. Dawn.
Yeah, you're right.
They're not even trying to win. I could understand if they were winning. You're like, all right, like I see they trying to put a team together, a squad. They're not even trying to win. So I'm just like, forget that, man.
Man,
wherever LeBron goes, I follow.
So let's go Lakers.
basically. But listen. We are here to talk about topics outside the box. We're here to talk about Kwesi's favorite journalist, Kwesi's favorite person, favorite antagonist, troll.
No,
Skip Bayless.
Yeah. I wouldn't say he's not my favorite antagonist. My favorite antagonist is Jason Whitlock.
Yeah.
I can go on.
That's Dr. Dawn's boy right there. Yeah.
I can go on and on about how much I dislike him. But we'll keep it to just one guy for now.
Well, the reason we're talking today is 2 weeks ago, Skip Bayless got into some, I say, hot water for his comments on Dak Prescott, who is the quarterback of the hapless Dallas Cowboys. Right? Because that's another team that always thinks they're going to win, right? They always think they're going to win, right? And so Dak Prescott had said that when COVID started, he felt a little bit depressed. And then very shortly afterwards, his brother, unfortunately, Jace, committed suicide. So you throw on top of that, and he just was in a certain place. And he has been very open about that and recently did an episode on this interview talking about that. Well, America's favorite troll comes on and basically says, well, because you are a football player, because you are the quarterback, quote unquote, of America's team, basically, and I'm paraphrasing, you don't get the privilege to really speak about, those issues, openly, because people will use that as, an opportunity to gain an advantage of you. Let's say you get, you're getting beat by a team, they're going to throw that. What are you going to get depressed? These are some of his words that he used. And he got, a lot of hate on social media, up to the point where the next day he didn't make an apology, but he did kind of just clarify some things, which actually I think made it worse. So, Dr. Dawn, we got you on since you are our resident psychiatry expert. You work with athletes, so you know what's the deal with all this stuff. So we want to get your thought process on all of this. And what did he say? Was it really that bad, or what do you think?
It was horrible. It was horrible. I mean, this dude, listen, he was the ultimate troll. The ultimate troll. Seriously. I thought it was a joke, honestly. I could not believe that Skip would make those comments, especially about Dak and his family situation of losing their brother. And on top of that, National Suicide Prevention Day out of the whole month of September. And then you're talking about mental health, which athletes typically don't talk about openly. And so just, level that with his ignorant comments. I was floored. And it was very damaging. It could have been and probably is damaging for those who look at his broadcast, who think, who care about his comments. Athletes are very self-critical of themselves. And so they look at news outlets, especially the sports media, because they want to know what they're saying about them. Right. And, when this came out, I know there were a number of athletes. I talked to a few of them who thought that, wow, like, first of all, did he really say this? And then some of them were like, oh, well, I guess I can't really talk about, me having a panic attack 4 weeks ago. So, yeah, I mean, what he said was very influential. And I thought it was definitely damaging to those who want to talk, but, can't talk or it's hard for them or difficult for them to talk about what's going on within their personal lives.
Yeah, I mean, with someone with such a big, large stage to say that type of comment, basically kind of condemning, Dak's thought process, I think is really damaging. Because I agree with you. Like, there's a lot of people out there who just want to talk and maybe are looking for someone who is really prominent to kind of just say, hey, look, like, if I'm feeling this way, then it's okay. Like Dak is feeling that way. I could come out and say what have you. I thought when I was actually watching it live as it occurred. And I'm like looking around like, is this a joke or something? Like, is he really, really saying this stuff? You know what I'm saying, Kwesi? Like, it was crazy, man.
The way he started his comment too, like saying like, oh, some people are going to be very upset with me. Some people are going to be angry that I'm saying, and you're like, and like, as he's saying, I'm like, oh man, what horrible thing he's about to say. And then he said it, and I was like, and I thought the same thing. I was like, you can't be serious. Right. Like you can't, like, you're really saying that a guy who just lost his brother, who we've all been going through the same, like, just staying at home, not really seeing your family members, not really seeing your friends, that though, like that is a struggle. And you're saying like, yeah, I don't want to hear about that.
Yeah.
Like you shouldn't be saying that. Like, it's like, what?
He thought he was slick though, because he tried to DQ and disqualify himself at first.
Exactly.
And then he said he's the wrong person to ask about this.
Yes.
And I think for me, the real frustrating part is like when it comes to being a QB of an NFL team, it's just like, wait, hold on a second. Like, let's just slow down. First of all, it's the Dallas Cowboys. Right? But like, let's slow down a little bit, right? Like, they haven't won in like 30. Why do they think they're so important? That's the funny thing too. Like, they're like Knicks fans, right? And I'm not sure, but it's just like, dude, like, really, like, when you think about like a life versus being, QB of an NFL team, like, in the whole scheme of things, this is really not that big of a deal, Like you said, Kwesi, like, the guy just lost his brother, months ago.
Yep. I mean, he's and I think, and I mean, we've seen it with, probably the most famous athlete of currently, LeBron, is that people don't see athletes as people. They see them as just these like things that are just out there meant to entertain us. And when you get an athlete who comes out and is like, okay, like, I'm just gonna, because you go in an interview and people start asking questions and just like, yeah, like, this is what I'm going through. Like, that's them like opening themselves up. That's them realizing that like they are in a time and a moment in which like, okay, it's okay for me to be a little more vulnerable, because me being vulnerable is going to help other people. Me being vulnerable is going to make you see me as not just an athlete, but like it's an actual person. And then you get comments like Skip, and you're just like, oh, we're just going backwards with everything else. We're just going backwards because it does. I mean, it doesn't serve a purpose, Yeah,
I mean, it doesn't. And he invalidated him. I mean, he basically dehumanized him to where he played a role on a team and he, disqualified him as being human and having emotions. And it's interesting because, especially at a time like this, and being a child psychiatrist as well, I mean, a lot of these kids are going through some things, and to the point where they have thought about suicide. So, think of it from that vantage point as well, as like, you have kids who are watching Dak Prescott come out and talk about this, and this may be a open door for them to have a conversation. All of a sudden, here goes Skip Bayless and just, being very insensitive in nature. So it's not just about being athlete, but this is what you're saying to our human population, right? And so, I mean, I just wish he would have just stopped. I mean, he should have had an expert on, right?
Right. That's the other thing I was going to say. Just do that.
Right. Yes. Like, stop. Don't stop. Don't say anything that you're not credible to say, because this is definitely not your field to talk about.
You can see Shannon was trying to play the right role, but even you could tell even at that point is like, well, like I can only defend the guy so much, but after a while, it's just like, I agree. Like they should have just had an expert on the show come and speak about this. Yep. Dr. Dawn, I want to ask you a question. Like, talk to us about the positive effects of being open about it. And is there anything negative from speaking openly about it? Not from what everybody will say about you, but just from an internal standpoint. What does that do when you're talking about that in public?
Yeah, so it's like therapy. It's therapy for the soul. And when I recommend therapy, because this is something that was a social event that happened, right? COVID, the loss of his brother to suicide. These are two major social events that have happened, and he was actually having a very difficult time in dealing with them. He mentioned depression, he mentioned anxiety. And so depression, anxiety occurs, and it can appear differently in different people. But if this is kind of a social trigger, it is not going to necessarily be managed by medicine per se. But I just want to be simple in saying this: we have to talk about it. Because part of our brain in releasing these emotions, trying to figure out how we feel, how we can manage it, how this affects, it affects us, how this affects our performance, who we are, our thought process about it. It's about talking about it. And I know it sounds as simple as I'm saying it, but it really is. Therapy is amazing. It's freeing. It's a part of just kind of how you're able to release. And so what he was doing was also therapeutic, I'm sure, for him and freeing for him. But also it helped, I'm sure, millions of people just hearing him. They didn't have to necessarily be depressed. They're seeing someone in the spotlight who's often admired, who doesn't necessarily share these things, right? And is also being very vulnerable. Vulnerability is not a bad thing. It's actually a human thing. It's actually a strong thing. And so I just associate all those things and what Dak did. And it was very commendable for him to be able to do that. Not just for him, but also for everyone he was speaking to.
I'm interested in what you mentioned, like that social part, because it seems as though like Skip was trying to say, well, because it's COVID, like he's trying to say, well, if it's COVID that you're having anxiety over, or that you're depressed about, that's something that you should be able to handle. Obviously, the death of your brother is a separate thing.
Right.
But you can't talk to us about that. Is one more important than the other? Should people, because I know you mentioned one can't be taken care of with medicine. Clarify all this up for us. So.
Yeah, definitely. So when we look at depression, anxiety, or any mental health condition, how we view it as psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, is that we look at it from a biological, psychological, social standpoint. That's kind of like our way of evaluating how people function. So there are biological factors, there's psychological factors, there's social factors. So biological factors would be, for an example, if there's a family history of depression, of anxiety, if there's a medicine that's causing someone to feel depressed or anxious, if there's a medical condition that's causing someone to feel depressed or anxious. So those are some common features of biological features. And then like insomnia, decreased sleep, not eating well, okay? And then we look at psychological factors. This is like our defense mechanisms. This is where how we see ourselves in the world, how we view the world sees us, our perceptions. And so when you look at that, it's all about like self-confidence, self-worth. And so those are some examples of psychological factors. And then social factors would be where we spend our time. So is at home, with family, at work, our friendships, finances. So everything socially, those can be stressors as well. So for example, the death of a loved one. If someone were to come into my office and they're grieving the death of their loved one, and they're not at a point where I'm highly concerned for their safety, or, for example, if I lost someone, I would cry. That's a natural, human emotional experience, right? But if I'm not sleeping for 2 weeks and I'm not going to work, I'm not getting out of bed, then we're looking probably more into like a major depressive episode. So there's specific criteria that we look at that can actually distinguish between what's grief or bereavement versus depression. So if someone is grieving the loss, let's say it just happened and they're tearful and, they're having these thoughts, then I may not necessarily recommend a medication, because this is a social trigger that's actually resulted in a person's response, emotional response. But if it goes on to the point where it definitely meets clinical criteria for depression, for example, low moods, not motivated, decreased interest, not being able to focus, not eating or eating too much, not sleeping too much, then that's the point where I would have a conversation to get an understanding of how this is interfering with their lifestyle. And if it is for a particular time frame, we may discuss a medication. Mm-hmm. So there's certain clinical criteria that a person must meet in order for me to really have that conversation. But every case is different. When you're talking about Dak, and I heard the interview, he was basically just saying, listen, I'm a football player. We practice every day pretty much on season. They work out rigorously off season. They have this whole schedule, right? So being in the house is very different for many of the athletes. Most of them are not even used to being home, or weren't used to being home at this time. Away at camp, doing other things. And so I can understand that if my body, which is exercise, which is a common, I would say, physical activity that prevents depression, that helps anxiety management, right? That, allows the blood flow and the oxygen to get to your brain, and all of these things are making me feel good. And now all of a sudden that routine has changed. I can understand how COVID or a situation like that could lead a lot of these athletes to, feel this way. And it shouldn't compare to losing a loved one. And that is subjective. If someone is feeling the way that they feel, they should be able to express that. And so Skip should never be in a place, or anyone else for that matter, to help determine if someone should get over something or deal with it. And that's the problem with mental health, is that we all experience something at some point in time, and it's all about how we manage it. But no one should be judging us on how we're managing it.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen a lot of people now, obviously, because everyone's home or in some form of being home. Are you seeing that being home in quarantine has triggered a lot of people who didn't think they were people who would have depression? It's now triggered that depression in people, or triggered some form of depression in people?
I have. Even my introverts.
Yeah.
And I think of it like this: everyone has lost in some degree a sense of autonomy. So we have a choice, right? The autonomy. So either, prior to COVID, we had a choice of just, staying home, working from home if we can, or going out here and there. But now that COVID has basically and I'm just talking about just quarantine. I'm not talking about all the other impacts COVID has had, because obviously it has. But just staying inside. Our human bodies are not built and designed to stay indoors for a period of time. We're all at risk of acquiring depression doing that. Yeah. So, it's important for us to have structure. It's important for us to even get out the home. We don't necessarily have to go anywhere, but if we have privilege to a backyard or a safe neighborhood that we can walk in, those are things we should be doing. Physical activity, sleeping, well. Everyone's sleep schedule has been off, or majority of people's. They have the COVID diet or appetite, I hear, where they've gained a couple of pounds, right? And so, that tells me that, a lot of things that were a routine for us are no longer routine. We created a different routine. And so even with that change with our body and our cognition, that can actually bring on some mental health conditions as well. My patient load has, I would say, quadrupled over this past few months just because of COVID. Mm-hmm.
I can imagine,
Yes.
The thing that I've definitely realized, I didn't think about it at first, is I've been actually calling Kwesi more often recently, or just talking in general, just telling people how I feel. Like I will send a text to Kwesi saying like, yo, I saw this and how are you doing? Or like, I'm feeling a certain type of way about things, just because, I don't know, COVID has forced me to realize a couple of things. Well, first of all, 2020 has just forced me to recognize my mortality with Kobe first, and then COVID, and then Chadwick, and then that Ruth Bader like everybody, like this is one of the worst years that I can remember, but you just are forced to realize, how things can change just like that. And, you find yourself, or at least I find myself more in my feelings, so to speak. And as a trauma surgeon, I'm not used to being there, right? Because for me, I see death, I see destruction on a daily basis. And it's just one of those things where you're just like, there's always that wall, right? But when it's happening in front of you all the time and it's affecting you, it's completely different, So it's really interesting. I wonder if you can liken the way how athletes would respond to what Skip said, maybe to even how physicians will respond, because there's so many stigmas that they have to worry about. Like, well, how will my patient population even view me if they know that I have an issue, right? Like that's got to be one of the scariest things, and they probably suffer in silence.
Yes, they are suffering in silence. It's interesting because even prior to this, I have ADHD, Dr. Nee, you're well aware of that. And so, me treating people who have ADHD, and I have it as well, I had thought about
did you know that?
Nah, I
surprise.
Like,
we're not laughing at you, Dr. Dawn. We're not laughing at you.
Yeah.
You're fine. But that was a thought I had, Dr. Nee. How am I able to be authentic and manage my patients who have ADHD, and then also admit that I have ADHD, because it's going to come out some fashion form. But it's actually
your podcast is called
From ADHD
to
Visibility.
Right.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. But it has allowed me to develop a therapeutic relationship with my patients like no other. They're telling me things that they say they've never told any other doctor before, just because they feel that I understand. And that's why I felt that Skip Bayless's words can be damaging. When athletes are really, now we're in the season of many of these professional leagues, mandating psychiatrists on teams, or having a mental health group that's capable for athletes, even our collegiate athletes, right? And now here you have a media personality coming in and say, kind of, in other words, you just shut up and dribble, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't have feelings, you're America's favorite quarterback. You just go ahead and play. You can be able to handle this without telling everybody. I mean, where's the conflict, right? It's a huge conflict. And so now, we're really in a season where athletes are being open about their feelings and understanding that, some of these athletes have been called athletes since they were in 6th grade or before. And that's all they know. That's all they've been identified as. They don't have feelings. They just need to go ahead and practice. They need to make this money. They need to represent their family, their community, where they're from, so there's a lot of pressure that they're experiencing that they're not able to release. And when they do release, it may be damaging. It may be above the head hit, to somebody. They may be boxing on the field. I mean, come on, you know what I'm saying? So drug, substance use, domestic violence. I mean, there's a lot of things that these athletes go through. And I'm not saying that it's not a comparison issue to the athletes in the world and society, right? But specifically athletes who just don't have an outlet. So now you have that doing a human thing, and all of a sudden he's criticized for it.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here? This is not right. So I feel it's up to us who support athletes in this arena that we should be supporting them even more. And we should be stepping up to people like these comments that Skip Bayless make, and just educate. Educate is so important. It's very important.
No cancel culture, just educate. Look at that.
Still on the debate block.
Well, he's
I was with Skip on and off, because I like the antagonism, but I was just like, okay, now you fooling, man. What you saying? Are you serious?
So, because I don't think he got in trouble, because I think that he's got a huge stake at FS1. Yeah. So I think he kind of runs the show between him and Colin Cowherd. I think they both run the show there. Mm-hmm. But he did say something the next day. But I thought what he said the next day made it worse, because just like we said, it's like he was trying to equivocate. And it was just like, dude, like, either way, no matter what, like, the comment was obviously old guard. We're trying to move away from that.
That's exactly what it is. I mean, it's the way in which we view athletes in like the 90s. Like I don't want to hear about your troubles. I don't want to hear about your problems. Like I got season tickets that I'm paying $5,000 for. So you're just gonna shut up and you're just gonna be an athlete. Yeah. And I mean, again, like we're 25 years past all of that, yet there are a lot of people who are just not. I guess the other part for at least me that I took away from his comment and from Dak's comment is something that I'd learned maybe like a couple days ago, that, Black men deal with a lot of, I mean, obviously there are a lot of pressures, but Black men are what is it, like they don't seek out therapy. There's a huge stigma for it. And so I saw the video right after I'd learned that, and I was like, this is not helping. Like this does not help. You've got like a Black man who plays for America's team, and then you got somebody going on TV, a white man saying like, yeah, just keep quiet. Like it doesn't, it just, yeah. I mean, again, it doesn't help anything. It doesn't move anything forward. And it got guys like me see that, and they're just like, all right, I'm just going to kind of keep my problems to myself, Oh.
It's insane.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is like you have vulnerable populations that are higher likelihood to get these things, or just not have the financial ability to get help, or feel like there's a stigma, and now you just kind of push them more into the corner with this stuff. And that was the part for me that I was just like, all right, like what was the goal of this, what you were trying to say? And how do you know that people on the other team are going to use this as a weakness? You have no idea. They may just be like, man, dog just like made it easier for me to come out now, right?
Yeah. Like DeMar DeRozan.
Right. DeMar DeRozan. Kevin Love.
Yep.
Kevin Love has been open about it. Yep. Yeah. Who was the other one?
Keon Dooling. Who's actually a part of the therapy team for the NBA, right? But I think you brought up a great point, Dr. Nee, because if you look at the demographics of the NFL players, 70% are Black. So are you talking to the culture? Or are you talking to just this quarterback who is your team?
Yeah. Right. Right. And we know this stuff doesn't discriminate. So everybody goes through this, so I don't know, here's a question I have for you is now, with COVID and like you said, your practice has quadrupled. So, the ability to get in-house and be face-to-face with a psychiatrist may be a lot more difficult. So how does someone determine, do they need to see a psychiatrist versus a psychologist versus a counselor? Like, how does all that work, especially now with telehealth and BetterHelp? They're not a sponsor, but you know what I'm talking about. Like, how does all that stuff work out?
Yes, great question. So actually, I think it's easier for people now just because a lot of us are virtual. I've been virtual since 2014, so about 6 years. I have a virtual practice. I'm licensed in 6 states, so I'm able to see people across states. But, that's an interesting question because there's really not one person that family or individual goes to. They usually may end up at a therapist first, or a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And if we need them to defer, or we need to defer them or refer them out, then we will do that. So let's say someone comes up to me or makes an appointment with me, and I feel that, okay, at this point, they don't necessarily meet clinical criteria for medication, but they can actually benefit from therapy, then I may refer to a therapist. And usually when they're coming from their primary care doctor, they may likely send them to me first because I'm a medical doctor. And so just having, being on the same level as my colleague who's an internist or a family practitioner, they may often come to me first just to evaluate the needs that that person or individual needs. But a psychiatrist is a person that went to medical school. And so we did 4 years of medical school. Our residencies are usually 3 or 4 years, depending on if you further that with a fellowship. And there's different types of fellowship programs that we go through. So I did child psychiatry, which was 2 years additional. So we actually deal with medications, and that's what our main focus is. I'm a little more than that. I also do ADHD coaching. So I specialize in ADHD and also do coaching with my patients as well. And that's really just behavioral management, discussing organizational skills, time management skills for people who have ADHD. Psychologists actually attend graduate school. And so that usually is a 4-year duration. They actually focus on instituting psychological testing, which is objective. And so these are things that they may institute on paper, by computer. It just creates a non-biased view if a person may meet clinical criteria for a mental health condition. That's difficult to tell just by us interviewing that person. Some of them as psychologists may actually engage their patients in therapy as well. And then you talk about therapists, which I have a therapist. Yay. I love my therapist. Listen, it would be a different dawn if I didn't have a therapist. Yes. And so then you have a therapist, and basically therapists are basically individuals who are master's level, training level. They're social workers. These are individuals that do talk therapy with their clients. And so you don't get advice from therapists. People have a misconception of what a therapist's role is. They actually help guide you through your thought process, how you're thinking about things, your perceptions, and is your perception equal reality of the situation. And so you ultimately make the decision in this, right? So it's not where you're getting advice from someone, but it's basically just trying to have some self-betterment and understanding about how you think. And that may incorporate your past, things outside of your control. That may incorporate your current situations that are interfering with how you respond or you behave. So I think it's very enlightening to have a therapist. So I wish everyone had access to a therapist. I think our world would be a better place, because oftentimes things happen outside of our control. So it's how we respond to those things that matter.
Would you I mean, I'm assuming you'd recommend, no matter, like, even if things are going well, you think, is there a certain point in life where you think, like, all right, it's time you probably should start talking to somebody. Not like in terms of like activity.
Yeah, not when you're punching walls and the holes in the wall.
But I mean, like I would say, like, do you think, like, it's good for a, junior in college just to start talking to a therapist, or maybe even like somebody who just graduated start talking about it? Like, at what point do you think, like, okay, like, now is a good point in which you should start, like, the process?
I wish it was mandatory. I really do. I wish it was like a physical exam. I wish we could get mental health checkups. I wish it was a part of a physical exam, that everyone was required to get. The reason why I love it so much, so as a psychiatry resident, we were required to have therapy sessions, not just to talk about our patients, but also to talk about our own feelings.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so valuable, important in my training, because it just allowed me to say, okay, I'm very emotional about certain topics within psychiatry, so I may not necessarily do that. I picked ADHD for a reason. One, because, I have it, but the other is because I'm I'm an emotional person.
Yeah.
And so I love what I do because I love to help people, but there has to be some boundaries as well. And so therapy allowed me to create those boundaries. It allowed me to understand my emotions better, so that I could not, like how you said, Dr. Nee, there's a wall that you probably had to learn how to build up, just being a trauma surgeon. For me, I had to build that wall too. And I would come home, think about patients, try to solve problems and go on. But it was very damaging because it was overwhelming for me. And so there has to be a period where people stop. And I get a sense that everyone can go through that, regardless of what they do, who they are, because life happens. Yep. And so it's just, how do you respond to that? Do you, to answer your question, I think that when you notice that something is just not going well, or how you're responding to something, how you're feeling about it, how you're thinking about it. So, thinking about it as far as ruminating, it's hard to get these thoughts out of your mind, or you're thinking of having emotions that are just challenging for you to try to help manage. Yes, that definitely, I would recommend a therapist to try to just kind of talk it through, to see if something is there. But I wish everyone had a therapist for prevention. Prevention. Yeah. Because I think people, especially with social media, I feel that a lot of times our emotions are deflected. We basically can disregard how we're feeling, and it becomes an actual behavior automatically.
Yo, hold on.
We just gotta skip that emotional part, right?
On that note, did you see that movie on Netflix? The social, was it the social
dilemma?
The Social Dilemma.
Oh my God, yes.
Yo,
it's in my list.
Oh, you may want to watch it tonight, brother.
Oh no, it's late. It's late.
Look at you using your algorithms to get him to watch that movie.
Yeah, I know, right?
That's what the movie's about. The movie just basically says like we are no match for the algorithms of Facebook. You know, any of these social media platforms, they are so powerful, and the way how they do it in this movie, it's literally a cautionary tale of what happens, you know, when we just get all engulfed by social media. And it just shows that our brains, as primitive as they are, or even as advanced as we think they are, is no match for some dude from Stanford who's writing algorithms on his his window. You know,
we're all just some form of a calculation.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
It is crazy. I mean, it made me think, like, if I have businesses, would I still be on social media? You know, should I be deleting my personal accounts? Like, ooh.
It's crazy. You know, here's the one thing I want to ask you. The one last thing I want to ask you. This is I want you to get real on this one. Is, you know, for you to come out and say that you have ADHD, like, I'm serious. Like, that could have been, you know, a death knell, so to speak, from a career standpoint. You know, and much like an athlete coming out and speaking about, you know, the issues that they may have, they may think that speaking about that may, you know, compromise them in some form or fashion. So, you know, we know that there are docs who are listening to the show. There are med students. There are people even from different professions who may feel a certain way. Like, I can't speak out about this because I'm scared of this type of repercussion. Take us through the thought process of you know, finally coming out with this, and how you were able to kind of just be very cool with it, and how now, like, literally that is your greatest strength, your greatest asset right now.
Yes, great question. So I failed my boards 5 times.
Damn.
When
really?
I was.
I mean, I'm not laughing, but
okay, I'm laughing, so it's all right. 5 times.
Yeah.
5 times that me spend an extra year.
Is that how you realized it?
Yes. Later on, it's my last year of child fellowship. So this is 12 years post college, I guess. Yeah. Final year, 2 months before I'm expected to graduate, become a child psychiatrist, I found out I had moderate ADHD. Moderate at that. Okay. And at that moment, I didn't believe it. I actually saw 3 people. I saw 2 psychiatrists and 1 psychologist because I did not believe I had ADHD. And up until this point, I mean, I had been managing. I mean, I was chief resident of both my programs. I was, you know, organizing. I opened up a clinic with one of my attendees. Like, there was so many things I was doing all at once. I was like, how can I have ADHD? And I'm managing a clinic of kids who have ADHD predominantly, you know, but I was in denial because I would study for 5 hours straight. That was normal to me. I would skip meals. I would be very interested in something and would not do other things, but I would, you know, basically procrastinate all the time because that anxiety at the end would get me to go and do it finally. I mean, there were so many things that I taught my brain that was that became my sense of normalcy that just wasn't healthy. It was very unhealthy. And so I had discovered that there were just not enough resources in the community for one of the most common conditions in our society for people to be able to get management, understanding about this condition. So I decided at that time, I'm okay with allowing people to know I have ADHD. Mm. And I think to this day, I've seen a few physicians. I know a few physicians that have it, but are not talking about it. They've actually came to me and said, you know, I don't think I can just reveal this. I'm like, that's okay. You don't have to reveal this. It's okay. You know, but I just encourage you to get help for it. It doesn't, you don't have to publicize it. And I've had doctors who said, well, I feel that my medical boards will come after me if I tell them I have ADHD. And I'm like, no, that's discrimination. It cannot do that.
Say that again, please.
Discrimination. Cannot do that. You have to do what's best for you. And when you have ADHD, it doesn't go away. You can't turn it on and off like a light switch. This is something that you're going to have for a lifetime. And so it's important that, if this is something you think you have, why not get evaluated and then make an informed decision at that point? But I highly recommend that you get management or receive management if you do have it, because it's life-changing. And that's why I created From ADHD to Amazability, because I want people to understand that this is a condition that can be manageable and you can do some amazing things. Like Simone Biles or Michael Phelps, even Michael Jordan has ADHD. Did you know that?
Michael Jordan has ADHD?
Michael Jordan has ADHD. Yes. Richard Branson has ADHD. He has moderate ADHD. He's actually openly admitted that. I mean, a lot of these CEOs and execs who have 3 or 4 businesses, who are entrepreneurs, have ADHD, because we can multitask. And even though we're not designed to do that very well, our brain is just able to do that, especially if it's well-managed ADHD. So organization is very key, structure as well. But yeah, it really is an amazability in my mind, Yeah.
Do you, like, when you meet with like a patient, first time patient, whatever age, do you tell them right in the beginning that, like, this is something I have and that I deal with, kind of to break the ice? Or do you let them kind of open up to you, and then, if you find that they're struggling, you kind of just say, like, hey, this is something I have also?
Yeah, I don't necessarily reveal it all the time.
Okay.
I don't. I reveal it when I have to.
Yep.
I use helping manipulation, is what I call it.
Okay.
When someone is not as open, or when someone just feels invalidated.
Yep.
I said, well, did you know I have moderate ADHD? And their eyes will buck wide open, like, you're a doctor and you have ADHD? I'm like, yes, I'm a doctor and I have ADHD. Yeah. Yes. Many of us do.
Yeah.
Well,
no,
look.
but it's, yeah.
Well, look, this was a real conversation. I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
and,
same here.
I think that, these are the conversations that we all need to be having as professionals, because, we joke, we have fun. And I think it's good to have these conversations, because this is how life is, right? Like, sometimes you got to laugh to prevent from crying, right? And we have to lean on each other, and really help each other get through these situations. So I bet you Kwesi didn't know that I was calling him because I was feeling a certain type of way, but I've been, so I've just been open about that, and Dr. Dawn, I appreciate you coming on the show talking about this, because, when I saw that, I was like, we got to talk about this. It really kind of helped demystify. And I'm really glad, and you mentioned it earlier, like the entire sports community really came up and rose up and said to Skip, like, nah, you crossed the line too far.
Yep.
Like, that's not right, So
that was actually prideful to see, is that, like, everybody was just like, nah, like, this is, we can't allow this, because I think they all know that they all deal with something.
Yeah.
They all deal with something. And you can, I think they were all like, you can comment on my play, you can comment on my extracurriculars, don't comment on my mental health. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point. So,
yeah.
So this was a dope conversation now. So Dr. Dawn, if people want to get in contact with you, if they want to maybe schedule a session with you or even listen to you on social media, tell us how to get in contact with you.
Definitely. So on all social media platforms, I'm Dr. Dawn Psych MD. That's DRDAWN, P as in Paul, SYCHMD. And feel free to go to my website, drdawnpsychmd.com or adhdwellnesscenter.com. And there's a contact form on both of those websites where you can connect with me personally.
All right, y'all. So did the Lakers win?
No. They got it. They got it within.
I knew it. This one's gonna be no easy sweep.
We ain't recording with you no more, yo. You got bad luck, yo. You bringing that Houston Rockets energy over here, yo.
We salty right now. We salty right now. Oh my God.
You should be salty.
Man, come on, man. We can't get nothing over here.
And you see your boy D'Antoni was like, yeah, let me just leave before I get fired.
Right. He did the right thing. I'm listen. I'm hoping the Texans. Let me stop. We're going to another atmosphere. Yeah.
I'm sorry to tell you, but I think aren't the Texans 0-2 right now?
Yes.
Well, your best receiver is on a different team.
One reason.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. We got to end this though. So we'll catch y'all on the next one. Thanks for listening to another Topics Outside the Box. Peace, y'all.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.